Okay, this is a workshop about Agentic AI for life sciences. This is a follow-up to a conversation we had in February with the Bioinformatic Bytes Cafe, basically just doing an introduction to Agentic AI. So agents are actually quite distinct from chatbots, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. So on the left, I'm showing a kind of prompt box from chatbot. And what you see in the box is it's asking for, ask anything or how can I help you today? And this hints at really what chatbots are for, which is providing answers. So it's sort of a glorified Google search. On the right, agents, these are some examples of the agents prompt boxes. And you see here, it's asking for things like describe a task or find a small to-do in the code base and do it. And this gets to kind of the fundamental difference that agents complete tasks. So when you ask it to do something, its main purpose is not really to answer your question, it's to actually do what you're asking for. And we'll talk about kind of what that can include. So I would say chatbots and agents are both similar in fact that they collect information from the web. So if you give either of them kind of prompts that they don't know the answer to, they'll go search the web. But I would say agents are distinct and different because they can take actions and they use tools, and we'll talk about kind of what that means later, but involves reading documents, writing files, and calling other tools or application programming interfaces or APIs for short. So an important overview is the landscape of model providers. So these are companies that sell access to models. So across on the left column, we have GitHub, Anthropic, Moonshot AI, OpenAI, and xAI. And they have a host of models of Haiku, Opus, Sonnet, Kimi. You see here also they have the data retention. So zero data retention means that the provider will not store your data for any period of time. So this is the best option. And it means when you send in a prompt, the company won't save the data that comes with your prompt. So if you added a file and you asked it to analyze the file, they're not going to save the contents of the file. So that's what zero data retention means. But we also see that some companies have a 30-day retention. Some don't describe how much they save the data. So it's important to take that into account when using different providers. On the far right, we see also whether they train on prompts or not. And so none of these providers train on prompts. And that's more important than data retention because if models are trained on data, there's very easy ways to go get that data out of the model through kind of a bit of prompt hacking. So you don't want your data ever to be used in training models. I would say there are a handful of free models, and those do train, and those are, I would avoid those. But really, if you stick to the main kind of name brand companies like Anthropic, GitHub, OpenAI, Google, you wouldn't have to worry about that. So the agent is the chat box user to write prompts. So this is what sits on your laptop, and these are names included in this category include Copilot, Claude Code, Codex, and OpenCode. Now, those are sort of the way the user interacts with the model, and the user is usually paying for access to the model, and they're usually paying the provider. So the provider is a company that manages the access to the model, and they charge you. So those can include GitHub Copilot, Anthropic, OpenAI, and OpenRouter. And I would just mention that some providers also train models, right? So OpenAI makes a model, makes ChatGPT, but also can provide the model, so it can charge you for it. So, but you can use things like GitHub Copilot actually to access multiple models. So on the right here, we have the models. So these are just example models like Haiku 4.5, Opus 4.6. And the benefit of this whole system is that as models get updated, you can use the providers let you switch between them quite seamlessly. And so you can always kind of have an opportunity to choose the best model for your work. And we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. So my current recommendations are for you to use the Copilot agent. There's a web app, or there's a desktop app, and a terminal like command line app. Both have access to the same models, so they should work just as well. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. I would recommend the GitHub Copilot provider because educational institutions give access to credits through GitHub Education. So that takes some of the kind of financial burden away from trying these models. And the cheapest, easiest model to use and fastest is called Haiku 4.5. That is by Anthropic. So what would you use them for? So Mungo, can I put you on the spot for this? Just chat a little bit about kind of what research you've done at your institution.
No worries. I mean, you can leave the slides up. Yeah, that's cool. So essentially, I went around our lab and spoke to a few people about the different things that they do on their PC, analysis, etc. Trying to keep it quite broad, just trying to work out kind of different workflows, processes, and things people find quite tricky. And I asked them a series of different questions, but here I guess we've just highlighted a couple of different themes. Now on the left is theme one. Yeah, some people found that manual data handling and things were quite tricky or laborious. So we've got a range of people in the lab who analyze data in various different ways, not just like heavy coding people. So different analysis packages like GraphPad or Excel can struggle when the data gets much larger. So that's one thing that people found tricky. Also, people found like writing or documentation. So this can be writing up logs of what you've done throughout the day, or actually writing like grant applications and things like this. So it's a range of things, as well as like documenting the code or writing comments and things. And again, like things like troubleshooting as well. These are things that people found would take up a lot of time, and potentially is something that we could use AI to just speed things up or help them out and just provide, I guess, a helping hand, not necessarily always to do everything for them. And then there was a few other things that people highlighted as well. Now, on the theme two as well, I wanted to kind of talk to people about AI things at the end of these questions. So one of the key things is just finding out what people are concerned about. And overwhelmingly, this data security and confidence in the outputs, people said was very commonly there something they're concerned about. So I think this is quite important for people to know if we're trying to teach people how to use AI or what to do with it, and how to provide them with some confidence in the outputs. And kind of similarly as well as like an over-reliance or like loss of understanding of what's going on. So I think these two are quite close, and again, similarly, the accuracy of these things and whether they're hallucinating or not. So I think those top 3 points are quite similar in a way.
And I also included your kind of opportunities, low-hanging fruit, which I think is quite cool because it branches different audiences and different, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So after taking some of the interviews and things, I tried to identify some of these things that we think we could go for quite quickly. And yeah, like AI coding assistance, if anyone's used any of the tools and stuff, you know how helpful it can be in either drafting a script or troubleshooting a particular problem. It's one of those things that if you know how to ask a particular question about an error or something, you'll definitely get a better output. But I've also found the documentation, like writing README files, is probably not something I did very well before. But now I can quickly describe what I do and what the data is about, and then anyone else, like my colleague who works on a project with me, wants to look at the data or how I've structured things, they can just go in there and find that. So I feel like those things are quite an easy thing to do and teach people. And also you get a lot of impact from it. Even just going back to like the manual data handling, if you can tell someone how to write a tiny script to automatically pivot their tables or select particular data points or do a differential expression analysis, that would be quite straightforward, whereas previously it would have been difficult. So I think those are quite easy wins, as well as like robust literature searches. Now, I found in my own experience, these can be quite variable. I think we've spoken to people about this Edison API a bit, which might be a bit more accurate than just normal, kind of almost generalizable LLMs searching for references as well. But the other thing I wanted to highlight as well is these like big bets. So things that would be much more effort, but potentially can be much more valuable as well. So using like automated models running in environments where they can analyze and explore data in lots of different ways when they're plugged into different tools or skills to execute different tasks. And this can be like large exploratory data analysis or, building machine learning pipelines and testing them, evaluating them, and then learning from the outputs and then retraining and things like that. So that can be quite a long-winded autonomous session where you have less oversight on the outputs. I think what's quite closely linked to this is almost like centralizing data structures and making sure those are easily navigatable for AIs because I'd hope, from my point of view anyway, at some point we've all had pretty messy repos and data and things everywhere. And over the time, I've got better at doing that sort of thing. And it makes it easy for us, and it makes it much easier for an AI if you can have like a README and say, this is where my data is, and this is how I want to explore it. So those are sort of the big bets where we can have lots of big data sets that would maybe take us ages to look through, but we can automate different analyses or even just like allow people to be asking a question of an AI, say, I've got an interest in like tau pathology in this particular type of patient. Can you go find some interesting things about this? Quite broad, but that's kind of a highlight as well.
Yeah, actually, I think this is an interesting point to kind of pause because I think you mentioned having a repo as a basic requirement, kind of to like get into this. How have you found adoption with AI agents? When other skills like terminal or command line or using GitHub are kind of maybe need more training because it seems to be kind of you have agents, but there's also kind of an environment of skills that are also needed.
Yeah, so I mean, in our lab and things, there's not so much people working with AI agents and stuff, and I feel like a potential barrier to that is having some sort of terminal interaction or something like that where it almost seems a bit too foreign. So something like called Cowork might be really nice because it's got that kind of maybe easier to use interface. But yeah, so it's an interesting point.
Cool. I think see what the next slide is. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that, Mogo.
No worries.
So I don't know if folks want to go through this or if I looked at it. I've gone through with my own group, kind of basic, kind of introductions to use cases and kind of applications of Cloud Code, or sorry, agents. Let me pull up the repository for this. So firstly, what's available on the GitHub for neurogenomics is a tutorial. I'll start with that. And I've been pointing people to this who are kind of new to this uh, field already. I think setup is very important. We covered this during the intro. Access to GitHub education is kind of a free, easy leg in. And then I was sort of thinking about like what steps do people need to take before they can start really feeling confident and come up with their own ideas, I guess, within this field. So I think basic data analysis is one of those kind of friction points that agentic AI can really help. And plan mode, kind of a helpful start to that. So if I have a data set, um, and I want to plan an analysis, and you begin a conversation with the agent. Before I go too much, journal club and making slides, I found this to be quite tricky, but it's also kind of an interesting way into this because it's something that I think everyone has to do, make presentations. And actually, this slide has sort of changed over time using skills. So Anthropic have a big skills repository. So these are markdown files that actually go into the model ahead of time and basically provide context for the model to follow. So these are a great way to improve the kind of quality of the outputs. So it makes it more kind of stable. There we back. And there's interesting things like APM, which is the Agent Package Manager. So this is the way to kind of share skills or download skills easily without having to clone the whole repository. And then and this is what kind of my favorite example is kind of making people's own data portals. So if you want to do a single cell analysis, in a certain way that tools are not available for it currently, what can I build a kind of a platform or a way to visualize the data? And I think this is a quite kind of compelling example as well. And then kind of layering on GitHub on top of this, if you're quite happy with your portal or you want to share it. Folks have kind of looked at or want to look at after the meeting. I guess based on time, we won't really step through this step by step. We did this with our lab group and it was really informative. But yeah, it took us, we spent 2 hours properly going through it, everyone kind of trying it for themselves, getting set up. So I hope folks, maybe after this have opportunity to kind of work through those or share even kind of new examples, new tutorials that they've done. One, I have another conversation that I think has been going about too around this is the idea of kind of context management. So if you're on your agent, you can ask it to provide what its context is being used. So basically, every time you send a message prompt, the agent will actually pile up lots of information that you didn't ask for, or it knows ahead of time. So if you've said, from now on, I want you to use these tools, or you're in this repository, or you're working on this project, it will load those that text into its prompt. And when you ask a new question, it'll kind of keep that context in mind. So every time you're interacting with these, it's basically trying to bring along your whole conversation with it every single time. And you can imagine this gets quite big, so it actually gets quite filled. And one of the kind of improvements, or as the foundation models improve, the kind of context window, the size of that context is going to grow. So in one session, I asked the model what its context was through a command, and this is just an example. So it shows that system prompts. This can include different agents or memory. MCP tools. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. So It is a standardized way for agents to access tools provided by external providers, basically. So this one is PubMed, which I assume most people have connected. So if you ask it to do literature search, it'll go to the PubMed MCP tool and use the PubMed kind of programming interface to go access papers and materials from that. That's added to the context as well. And then your message. And there's a free space and then a buffer. So the free space is, the thumbs up to the whole space size of the context window. And then the buffer, once you fill up your context to the buffer, it will begin a process called compaction, where basically it takes your context window and shrinks it. So I think another kind of ongoing conversation folks are having is about the cost of models and kind of running out of credits. And actually, one thing I think is quite interesting is to connect this concept with the idea of context, because the two are closely connected. So on the left here, I have cost per message is the input tokens only, so this is what you're sending. And then the it scales directly with the size of the context. And if you see the table on the right, that's what the data was used to generate. You have the cost per million tokens of input. You see that these can be varying. So Opus 4.6 is $5 per $1 million tokens. And you see that it has a context window of 200K. So let's see if I can move what does that come out to? Okay, so yeah, so if you use the whole window every single time, it's going to cost you $1 per prompt. And if you're using the whole window, you're going to go through this kind of compacting process, and you might start having things in your context that are either irrelevant or that you're losing if you've kind of done a task for quite a long time. So these commands on the bottom right are things that I think are built into I see these are poor examples. Sorry, these are Claude code examples that a ton of people use Copilot. So I'll update these, but I'm sure there's close to one-to-one matches for these for all the different agents. But yeah, slash context shows how filled your context is and what's being used for. Compact is a helpful command, so it's something that you can run. Like if you've completed a big task, but you want it to keep most of the task in mind. That's a good opportunity to kind of compact it, reduce your window. Clear, I think, is also heavily underused. I think I think the most common use cases, one session running all day, different tasks. And actually, I would recommend, you complete something that's quite modular, clear it, and then the model can always agent can always kind of gather new context depending on what you're doing next. And then in Cloud Code, this is one I think the specific one, and I've seen it in some of the interfaces. You can have kind of a rolling ticker of how much context you're using, and so I've noticed some people notice like, yeah, this circle in the corner sometimes it drops all of a sudden, or sometimes it fills up all of a sudden. So I think this kind of that itself, I guess, needs some description, but it's basically, yeah, a lot of models share how much context is being used at the moment. And so it's worth keeping an eye on for kind of reducing hallucinations, but also for reducing running costs. Great. And then yeah, the last bit. So I think this presentation or these presentations and workshops have been basically kind of followed my learning with this because I'm quite new to this whole field. And so skills are something I'm quite interested in at the moment. On the left are some examples from Anthropic's kind of guide to skills, and they describe a task. Without a skill, if you want to do a repeatable task, I think a good example maybe is pushing code to GitHub, or I use it for making presentations and other aspects. kind of repeating analyses like differential gene expression as well. Do you want to describe every single time that you want this package? You want it to go make these plots and kind of choose these parameters. So with a skill, you have an opportunity to kind of define what you've done. And I think what's very helpful is after you've really, you can use the agent, sorry, to write the skill. So after you've completed a complex task, you can say, hey, save this as a skill and use it for next time. Do folks want me to go into more detail with skills, or are people quite comfortable with that? Cool. All right. Thought that was going to be more questions, but I think we're fine. Cool. All right. That's the end of kind of the prepared materials. ITP